In this video, you will receive a brief introduction to the ways diversity and multicultural issues impact the lives of young children. So, this is a social-emotional development course. Why are we talking about multicultural and diversity issues, you might ask? Well, if you think about it, how children feel about themselves, especially in terms of some of the identities we will discuss in this lesson, is central to the development of their self-esteem. Also, it is imperative that we prepare children well to go out into the world, able to interact with a wide variety of people. And so, how this lesson will be set up is that we're going to have a general discussion about multiculturalism and diversity, and then move to a more specific conversation about specific issues in subsequent videos that are posted on your Blackboard page for you to review. So first of all, when we talk about identities, what do we really mean? We're not necessarily talking about your identity as a soccer player or someone who likes to bake. We're talking about something that tends to have deeper roots and have a great impact on many or all aspects of your life. This list here is a pretty thorough, although perhaps not exhaustive list of identities that are especially important to the development of children and to how people see the world in general. And so take a minute and look over this list. One thing you'll notice about this list is that some of these identities are things that at least we think we can identify in people just by seeing them, hearing them talk a little bit. That's not always a safe bet. We could definitely be mistaken. But some of these identities are things that we really wouldn't know about until we spoke to the person and learned more about the person, or even better, found out how a person self-identifies. And so these topics here are things to keep in mind as we go through the rest of this video. So when we say multicultural education, what do we actually mean? The definition that we're going to use comes from the authors Golnick and Chin, and it is here for you to review in its entirety. Essentially, it says that multicultural education is a reform movement trying to fix something that's not working. It includes the belief that many things that happen in our school today and that happened in our schools in the past are harmful to children and just reinforce stereotypes and discrimination. Also, it assumes that diversity is a positive thing and that it enriches individuals and our society in general. Now, I'm going back to this list of identities here, and what I would like you to do is pause the video at this point and look at these identities and really try to think about your own experiences in schools, and try to think of ways that you yourself or someone you know or someone you might have just observed might have been mistreated or disadvantaged in some way in the school system related to one of these particular identities. Okay, I gave you a moment there to pause and think about this. I think for many of you, you might be able to come up with an example of each of these identities. Also, it's important to remember that these identities don't stand alone, that there's an intersectionality, ways that they work together. So for example, race itself is one thing, race combined with sex is another thing. So the experiences, say, of African American women might be different than the experiences of African American men, and the strengths and challenges that those two groups face would be different. And so that would be a way that sex and gender work together to change a person's situation. And so moving forward, we will talk about this notion of a meritocracy, because this notion of a meritocracy is one way that people are made to feel bad about themselves, and this reaches down even to our young children. And so a meritocracy is this idea that where you are in society is based on how hard you work. That if you are not doing very well, if you're struggling, if you don't have the financial resources you need, it's your fault because you didn't work hard enough. And that if you have plenty of money and plenty of power and a high position in society, it's because you deserve it and because you worked hard. Inequalities are a natural part of the system because this notion would tell us that some people will just work harder than others. In a meritocracy, individualism and competition with each other are valued over cooperation because really you just have to do what you have to do to get yourself ahead, and pausing along the way to help other people doesn't necessarily get you personally ahead, so it would be discouraged. So, think about it for a moment. In your opinion, is the United States a meritocracy? Is it true that if you work really hard, you always get ahead? And that those who are struggling are there only because they didn't work hard? I think most of us would say, no, that's actually not true. And we probably know many, many examples of people who have worked quite hard and continue to struggle. And we also can think of examples of people who had many privileges and many opportunities to advance, not necessarily based on their hard work, but because perhaps of some of those identities that we talked about earlier, because of their family situation. And so it's really important as an advocate for young children that we keep this notion in mind and realize that what we actually have is a myth of meritocracy, and it's often used to justify mistreatment of people, because if people are struggling and people say are in poor quality schools, if we believe it's because it's their fault, because either they or their family didn't work hard enough, society might be less likely to invest the resources we need to invest to truly give everybody an equal opportunity. Hard work, of course, does help people get ahead, but this idea of meritocracy assumes that everybody starts from the same place and then everyone has equal opportunities along their path, and that just simply is not the case. Some important terms here that we'll talk about will be privilege. Peggy McIntosh has written quite a bit about privilege. I will post a link out to some of her articles on Blackboard if you're interested in learning more. The way privilege is defined by Peggy McIntosh is power that is unearned. You didn't do anything to earn it. You were just born into it. You were born into a particular sex, a particular race. You were born into a particular nationality. And it's conferred systematically. It's not just random. It's institutionalized. We see it happen generation after generation, decade after decade after decade, that this power is conferred to members of a particular group. One thing that's interesting about privilege that Peggy McIntosh writes about is that it's extremely difficult for those who have privilege to see it. In fact, it's so difficult that people with privilege often don't believe they have it. Or the person's experiences might be so different, it's difficult for them to even wrap their head around the experiences of other people. Here's an example. Think for a moment that you are going to a public restroom at a rest stop, and there's just one other car in the parking lot, and you are going into the bathroom and you're all by yourself. What's the first thing you're going to do when you go in the bathroom? If you are a man watching this video, my guess is what you were thinking was, well, I would use the bathroom. And if you are a woman watching this video, almost exclusively, without exception, what the women in my classes, my face-to-face classes, tend to say is, I would check under the stalls because I don't want someone to sneak out and rape me. And so that's just not an experience that men live with. So that would be something that would be considered a privilege that men have. They don't have to have that same fear that women carry with them. Another example might be what happens when teenagers go shopping. If a Caucasian girl is shopping in a music store and an African American boy are shopping in a music store, their experiences might be quite different. Especially African American males repeat over and over and over again that store personnel follow them around suspecting them of shoplifting. This has nothing to do with the individual and everything to do with privilege. Did the white teenage girl do something to earn the right to be free of being suspected of shoplifting? No. It's something she was born with. It was a power and a privilege she was born with, and she did nothing to earn. Just like the African American boy who might be followed around did nothing to warrant that suspicion. It's just the way our society is still set up, even today, and it's something we really need to be aware of and always constantly look at ways that we have privilege in our society and think about how we can not perpetuate the power that comes with privilege at the expense of other people. Ethnocentrism is another important term to know about, and this is really just the inability to see other cultures as good as your own. And you might think that your own culture is better, but also maybe just normal, just natural, and that everything else is kind of strange or wrong. And so this comes out in our classroom sometimes when customs of cultures are first made known to us. And so some cultures might not eat certain foods. Some cultures wear certain types of clothing or have certain interaction patterns where it's not appropriate, say, for people of two different sexes to shake hands, or different ideas about eye contact. We have to always make sure that we are checking our ethnocentrism and making sure that we are acting in an appropriate way with an open mind to others' experiences and beliefs. We'll talk briefly here about ways that social problems are sometimes addressed in our society. There's the exceptionalistic perspective and the universalistic perspective. From the exceptionalistic perspective, we see incidents as kind of a freak occurrence that we didn't really see coming, and it's just a couple people. Where with the universalistic perspective, we see the deep root causes of social issues, and we see that problems are systemic. An example would be violence in schools. An exceptionalistic perspective might just say, well, this one particular child was troubled and we didn't really see it coming and he just kind of exploded and this happened and it's too bad, but now that he's safely in jail, that just won't happen anymore. Everything's okay. We might put up some posters that say, be kind, no violence in schools, and things that are really just band-aid solutions. Where a universalistic perspective would try to get to the root causes and realize that our children are often very isolated in schools, that we don't do a great job of taking care of people emotionally and socially and giving them the skills they need to get along well with people. Of course, that perspective takes a lot longer to address because it really is getting at the root, but it also offers solutions that will truly change our society. So from this brief introduction, we will move into talking specifically about certain identities. We really are just hitting the tip of the iceberg here with these issues, but we will talk about sex and gender, race, and developmental disabilities. But like I said, we're really just skimming the surface of these issues because we only have a couple weeks to cover this. I encourage you to look more deeply into these issues, and in the following videos I will give you some resources that you can check out to help you do that.